Have you ever thought that owning a personal airplane would be totally out of the question because you're not what most people would call rich? Well, me too. And I've got good news for you, because in this video, I'm going to share some of the secrets that I've learned to owning a personal airplane on a budget. Hello everyone, welcome back to Average Aviator. I'm Travis, and I'm just an average guy trying to make it in aviation. And in this video, we're talking about owning an airplane on a budget. And I'm probably just some random guy on the internet, but for some context, I may not know a lot about a lot of things, but I do know one thing pretty well, and that's owning an airplane on a budget. I bought my first airplane about 5 years ago, and I'm on my third now. Not that I have 3 airplanes. I'm not that rich, as this video might imply, but I definitely cannot complain at all about the means by which I live, so don't take that the wrong way. But I only ever had one airplane at a time, and I have done it very, very cheaply. And like I said, we're gonna talk about the secret to owning an airplane on a budget. And I'm not gonna make you wait till the end of the video to share that secret with you. I'm gonna share it right now. It doesn't have to be some huge cliffhanger, and it's probably pretty obvious. The secret literally is make sacrifices. Now, there's a lot that goes into that. I think I'm gonna break it down in like 4 sections of where you can make sacrifices and how you can make it work. But the overall gist, the encompassing idea behind all of it is making sacrifices. Now, first things first, I'm gonna assume that if you're watching this and considering buying an airplane, you probably already have your license, but there's a chance that you might not. There's a chance that you might be looking at buying an airplane even before you learn how to fly. And there's plenty of people that have done that and have been very successful at it. I'm not gonna talk too much about making sacrifices and trying to save on flight training. That's a whole different topic. That's for another video. But today we're gonna focus a little bit more on after you've got your license and you're looking at buying an airplane for a number of different reasons. And that's actually the first thing I wanna get into is the reason that you wanna buy an airplane. Like, number one is define your goals on why you want to own an airplane. Now, there's many different reasons why somebody would want to buy an airplane. For me personally, I wanted to buy an airplane so I could get my hours cheaper than I would if I had rented. And my goal to get hours was to go get my commercial and then go tow banners on the Jersey Shore. Now, that didn't end up happening, and it kind of got sidetracked. But building hours is one of the main reasons to buy your own airplane, because if you fly enough, you can own that airplane and fly it for a lot cheaper than you can rent. A couple other reasons is maybe you just want to have some fun on the weekends. Like maybe you don't want to have to share a club plane or only be confined to a 172 or a Piper Warrior or something like that. But the basic idea is define your goal. Once you've defined the goals that you want to achieve and realize what kind of flight hours you want, it's time to do some research on exactly what airplanes might help you achieve that goals, and specifically what airplanes do that the cheapest. If you're doing this on a budget and you can't have any airplane, you got to figure out which ones do it the best on the budget that you have. And one way to do that, that's literally the way that I did it, was I would just go on to Barnstormers and I just look at the list of airplanes and the list price. Now, the list price obviously isn't exactly what they're selling for, but it'll give you a good idea. Now, one thing to keep in mind while you're scrolling through these aircraft listings is that the selling price is not exactly the total cost price of the airplane. And an airplane that might be really cheap might still end up costing you in the future, if that makes sense. Now, when you're looking at all those listings on Barnstormers or whatever, don't discount experimental aircraft. Some people discount experimental aircraft and they're missing out a ton. Now, experimental aircraft can be a little weird and they have their own little quirks, but they can also be some of the most budget efficient airplanes out there. Like, a lot of them are the cheapest airplanes that you can get, with also getting the coolest and most performance that you can get. They're really cool. You can work on them yourself. They're a whole niche that some people just completely ignore, but if you're trying to do this on a budget, do not ignore them. Definitely look into it. So that brings us to our next section, which is on maintenance. And how can you save on maintenance? How can you sacrifice things, not safety, but how can you sacrifice things in terms of maintenance in order to be able to own an airplane as cheaply as possible? Now, obviously, the one thing that you cannot sacrifice on at all in terms of maintenance, or just in terms of owning an airplane in general, is safety. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the purchase price of an airplane doesn't denote the overall safety of an airplane. Often, the purchase price is more indicative of the cosmetic appearance and the cosmetic condition of the airplane, and not necessarily the mechanical condition. And when it comes to safety, the mechanical condition is a lot more important. A perfect example of this is the Mooney that I bought. I mean, the Mooney, when I bought it, and when I sold it still, the interior was crap, the paint was crap, but the overall mechanical condition of it was amazing. It had like 700 and some hours on the engine. You know, yeah, I put some money into it because some of the accessories needed replaced, but the overall engine condition was great, and the airframe condition was great. But the price on it, you know, like when I tried to sell it, I threw it up on Barnstormers, and people just wanted to buy it just for the engine. You know, it wasn't worth that much at all. It was worth the cost of an engine, really, because of its cosmetic condition. But that didn't make it any less enjoyable to fly. It was still an amazing airplane. It was still just as safe as everything else. So the point is that you can get a cheaper airplane without skimping on safety. There's plenty of other ways you can save on maintenance as well. The first thing that I would do is I would find a small shop at a small airport on the outskirts of the big city. And really, that's just because just like fuel is more expensive at the big airports, typically maintenance at the small airports is going to be less expensive than maintenance at bigger airports and bigger shops. It's just kind of how it works, and that's kind of what I found. Now, you want to find somebody that you trust, obviously, and somebody that knows what they're doing. But if you want to save a little bit to be able to actually fly your airplane and not just fix it, then I would say go for a smaller airport with a smaller maintenance shop. One of the other things you could do is be willing to sacrifice your time and be willing to do a lot of the things yourself. Save your mechanic some time by being willing to take off all the cowlings yourself. I mean, there's so many different times when I would have had a much larger bill from the mechanic if I hadn't opened up all the panels myself. You know, it can throw a monkey a screw gun and he can open up the panels. You know, it doesn't take that much, but it does take time. So if you're willing to do that, you can save yourself a lot of money by not paying somebody else to do that. The other thing is that you can do anything that is in Part 43. Now, of course, you don't want to do any type of maintenance that you wouldn't be comfortable with, but if it's in Part 43, it's technically legal, and you can save a lot of money on maintenance by being able to change your own tires or something like that. Speaking about saving your A&P time and yourself money, one thing that you can definitely do is form a good relationship with your A&P. I mean, that's how I saved a lot on my maintenance, is I made good connections with a lot of great people, and I probably gave them a lot less than they gave back to me. You know, they gave me a lot more than I could ever repay them. But, you know, a lot of times if you help them with random stuff, like say you help them with a tough job on another airplane, you know, just by holding a flashlight or finding tools. That was my specialty at the airports, has been finding tools that they've left or their coffee that they've left. You know, helping them little ways like that is gonna make them a lot more friendly, I guess. I don't know. Sometimes it just helps a lot when you have a real great relationship with your mechanic. And the only way to cultivate your relationship with your mechanic is to help them out in times that they need help. Like just cleaning out their hangar, or like I said, finding tools for them when they need it. Just different stuff like that. Now, another really big way to save is by not putting an airplane in the hangar and just tying it down outside. Now, some people might get angry at me for this, but tying it outside really could be the cheaper option in the long run. For example, when I lived in New Jersey, hangars were running anywhere from like $350 to $450 a month. Now, if you do the math, just what I would have spent on a hangar, I could have bought a completely different airplane in 5 years. So the question I had to ask myself was, is tying the airplane down outside going to completely destroy the airplane in 5 years? Obviously, it's not. So the cheaper option, even in the long run, would be to tie it down outside. Now, that's going to change depending on where you're at. Right now, I have the plane in the hangar. I have the plane in the hangar because, number one, the hangar is cheap, and number two, I have a fabric airplane. So it really just depends on your situation. But most of the time, tying it down outside is going to be the cheaper option. Now, I've talked a lot about sacrifices and making sacrifices in order to own your airplane, but there's one key component that keeps that together, that whole idea together, and will make it a reality, and that's the passion that you have. I mean, if you don't have a passion for aircraft ownership and the advantages that it gives you, you're not gonna wanna make those sacrifices, and you're just gonna end up either bitter on buying the airplane or just falling back into the trap of it not being feasible again. For me, the only reason that I have an airplane is, well, two reasons. One is the mechanics and the people, like the pilots and the people that I've met in aviation along the way that have just so tremendously helped me out, all the times that I've needed help. The aviation community has reached out so many different times to help me out in times of need. So that's one of the main reasons that I am able to own my own airplane. But the second reason is because of the passion that I have. Like, I am able to make these sacrifices because I prioritize. I think it was like Dave Ramsey that says, live like no one else now so that later you can live like no one else. And I think he was trying to say that in terms of like actually saving money and being financially successful, but it's aviation, so obviously that's not going to happen when you're passionate about aviation. But it works the same. I live like no one else. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people do this, but I live uncomfortably now so that I can spend those resources in aviation because that's my passion. The one interesting thing about having a passion and letting that lead you to owning your own airplane is that once you own your own airplane, it self-perpetuates the passion because it opens up so many other aspects of aviation that really aren't practical when you're just renting. A lot of rental places don't allow you to go on grass, and they don't allow you to take the plane overnight. And if they do allow you to take the plane overnight, you have to do it for a certain number of hours. So the fun to cost ratio is a lot lower. When you own your own airplane, the fun to cost ratio goes way up. How does the fun cost ratio go up when you own an airplane? Well, if you fly it enough, the cost goes way down. And if you're flying it a ton and you're flying it to things like fly-ins, which is where a bunch of people bring their airplanes and just BS about airplanes. You go to airplane camping, which is another really cool thing. A lot of those are airplane camping strips are on grass strips, and a lot of rental places won't let you land on grass strips. So there's like so many more things that you can do with your own airplane that you could with a rental plane. And even if they cost the same, the fun to cost ratio is way higher with an owned airplane, which helps perpetuate the passion, which helps perpetuate you sacrificing, which feeds into being able to own the airplane. So it's like a positive feedback loop, and it's really cool. I mean, that's the one thing that has kept me into it. That's just a really cool concept that nobody really talks about. And I know that's a lot of information, and I feel like I'm rambling a ton, but there's a lot of nuance to the secret to owning your own airplane, and I just want you to take away the fact that you can do it. I mean, I cannot complain at all about the way that I live and the means by which I've been given the resources that I have earned, but I definitely think that if you have the passion, even with a low budget, you can own an airplane and enjoy aviation with your own aircraft. So if you have any input on any other ways to save on airplane ownership, you can leave them in the comments below. I'm sure plenty of people would want to see them. And if you have any very specific questions, you can email me at averageaviatorchannel@gmail.com, or what's probably more effective is following me on Instagram, average_aviator. I'm pretty active on there, and I've got more photos and videos, so you can enjoy that. Send me a message on Instagram with any question that you have, and that is all I have for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see ya.